The trap in the stars. The colony ship Aspen Dawn was not built for war. It was a long, lumbering ark, its hull heavy with hydroponics pods, cryo bays, and prefab shelters meant for a frontier world. Families slept in its cabins, farmers walked its corridors, and children played in its gardens. It was a ship meant for beginnings, not battles. Ella had only ever known its warm halls and the smell of recycled air. At 9 years old, the idea of predators stalking the void beyond the hull was nothing more than a bedtime story. She sat in the corner of a storage bay, hugging her knees, her companion curled in her lap, a squat, shaggy honey badger named Knox. He was supposed to be nothing more than a pet, Earth's wildlife genetically tuned down just enough to live beside humans in space. When the klaxons screamed, everything changed. The lights turned red. The vibration under the floor shifted as the Aspen Dawn's engine strained. Through the comms came panicked voices, raiders, Velkir, boarding tubes. Ella remembered being shoved into the cargo bay by her mother. Stay hidden, no matter what. Don't make a sound. The door had sealed behind her. Now the only sound was Knox's slow breathing. The badger had curled into a ball of bristled fur, stubbornly asleep even as Ella's heart pounded against her ribs. She clutched him tight, her small hands shaking. The hatch blew inward with a thunderclap. Smoke spilled across the bay, followed by figures in jagged armor. The Velkir were tall, their eyes sunken behind insectile helmets, their voices chittering in cruel laughter. They carried shock lances that crackled with blue fire. "Well, what's this?" One sneered in a voice distorted through its mask. "A stray cub." Ella pressed herself against the crate, her breath caught in her throat. The Velkir advanced, amusement dripping from every movement. The humans said they were hard prey, another rasped. "But here is one alone. Weak, small, soft." Their helmets turned toward the lump of fur in her lap. "And she keeps a pet rodent. Pathetic." They approached, slow and certain, as though savoring the fear. Ella squeezed her eyes shut. She thought of her mother, her father, of all the families running through the ship's halls, and she wished desperately she could vanish. That was when Knox stirred. It began with a low rumble. Ella felt it through her palms before she heard it, a vibration rolling up from his chest. His small body uncurled, and his head lifted. Eyes open, dark, glassy orbs that caught the cargo bay's emergency lights and gleamed red. The Velkir froze. The sound was wrong. It was not the mewling of a frightened animal, but the growl of something ancient and furious, something that had no place in the cold metal of a ship. Claws scraped the floor. Knox rose to his paws, fur bristling, teeth bared in a snarl that made the raiders instinctively step back. The air seemed to thicken. Ella whispered, barely audible, "They shouldn't have woken him." One of the Velkir barked a laugh, trying to recover his bravado. "It's just a beast. Strike it down." He leveled his lance. The honey badger moved before the alien could blink. A blur of muscle and fur, he launched himself across the gap, jaws clamping onto the armored wrist. Metal screeched as teeth punched through, and the Velkir screamed, a high, rasping cry. Blood spattered the deck. The others recoiled, momentarily stunned. Knox didn't stop. He ripped, clawed, and hurled himself at the next raider. Every strike was savage, unrelenting, as though he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Plasma fire cracked, bolts sparking against the walls, but the beast twisted and lunged with reckless fury. Ella could only stare, her terror mixing with awe. She had always known Knox was fierce. Her father had joked that honey badgers feared nothing. But this was something else. This was the wildness of Earth itself, carried across the stars, answering violence with primal defiance. The Velkir had cornered a child. They thought they had found easy prey. Instead, they had woken the one thing in the galaxy that would never, ever yield. And Knox was just getting started, teeth against the void. The first Velkir's scream still echoed when Knox tore free of the armored wrist and lunged again. The raiders had expected compliance, terror, maybe begging. What they received was chaos. A claw raked across one's throat, sending him thrashing to the floor. Another swung his lance wildly, blue arcs crackling. But Knox darted under it, slammed into the alien's legs, and dragged him down with snapping jaws. "Kill it!" the squad leader shrieked. Plasma bolts filled the cargo bay, lighting it like a storm. Metal walls hissed with scorched marks. The Velkir fired blindly, unwilling to close distance. But Nox didn't fight like prey. He weaved, he feinted, he leapt straight into the fire. Shots seared fur and flesh, yet he did not falter. Ella scrambled behind crates, her heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide deeper. But she couldn't leave Nox. He wasn't just a pet. He was her protector, her shadow, her stubborn, impossible companion who once stole rations from her father's pack and fought an entire hydroponics bot because it hummed too loud. He would not abandon her, and she would not abandon him. Through the smoke, she spotted a control panel at the bay's edge. An idea sparked. Crawling low, she reached it while the aliens focused on the blur of claws and teeth. Her fingers shook as she tapped commands, rerouting emergency power. Lights overhead flickered, then died, plunging the bay into darkness. Nox's growl became the only sound. The Velkir cursed in their insectile tongue. Their helmets glowed faintly, but the badger was silent now, unseen. One muttered nervously, "Where is it?" The answer came in a scream. A body slammed against the wall, blood spattering across the glow of another's visor. Nox's shape darted between shadows, striking, vanishing, striking again. In the dark, he was not an animal. He was a demon. Ella's breath hitched, but she didn't look away. She worked the panel again, sealing secondary doors. She was trapping them, just like a father had taught her when catching pests in the food bays. "Think like the hunter," he'd said. "Make the move where you want them." Another Velkir fell. The leader roared in rage. "Enough. It is one beast." But his voice trembled. He'd seen its eyes in the dark. The last two tried retreating toward the hatch, dragging their wounded. Ella slammed the controls, locking it with a hiss. They were sealed inside with Nox. The honey badger padded from the dark, blooded but unbowed, fur matted with burns. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes still burned. The raiders backed away, their lances trembling. "You mock humans as weak," Ella whispered from behind the crates, her voice shaking but steady enough to carry. "But you don't understand. Nox doesn't stop. Not when he's hurt. Not ever." The leader turned toward the sound, furious and desperate. He raised his lance. Nox struck like lightning. The alien fell, throat torn open. Silence fell with him. The remaining raider dropped his weapon and pressed to the wall, trembling. Even Velkir had survival instincts. He muttered something guttural, a prayer or curse, before slamming his helmet controls and triggering his evac beacon. His body dissolved in a shimmer of transport light, leaving behind only his dead. Ella crawled from her hiding place, her small body trembling. The bay stank of blood and ozone. She approached Nox cautiously, as though he was something wild she didn't quite recognize. He limped, his shoulders scorched, muzzle red with blood not his own. Yet when Ella touched him, he pressed against her hand, rumbling softly. You did it," she whispered, burying her face in his fur. "You saved me." Nox huffed, as though the admission was obvious. But Ella knew this was only the beginning. She had heard the comms when the alarms first sounded. The Velkir weren't sending just one squad. There would be more, and now they knew. Somewhere on their ship, their commander had watched through helmet feeds. He had seen one child and one beast destroy his warriors. What would he do with that humiliation? He would send more. He would come himself. Ella hugged Nox tighter, eyes glistening in the emergency red glow. Her parents were still out there somewhere on the Aspen Dawn. Other families, too. They couldn't face the raiders alone. But maybe, just maybe, with Nox, they had a chance. The honey badger lifted his head toward the sealed hatch, growling low again, as though daring the predators to return. And Ella, heart still thundering, realized she was daring them too. Predator becomes prey. The Aspen Dawn shook again, harder this time. The Velkir weren't retreating. They were doubling down. Ella clutched Nox close as the deck vibrated beneath her feet. The honey badger's fur was ragged with burns, but his eyes still glittered with fury. He wanted more. Ella wasn't sure if that gave her comfort or fear. From the corridor came the sound of boots, many boots. The Velkir weren't sending a squad anymore. They were sending a company. The hatch blew inward with a thunderous crash, sparks spraying into the bay. Dozens poured through, their armor clattering, lances sparking with lethal energy. Their leader's voice boomed, "No more games. Tear this ship apart." Ella staggered back, her chest tight. She was only 9. She couldn't fight soldiers. Her hands shook, her breath ragged, until she felt Nox press against her leg. He growled, and she remembered what her father always said: "Fear is only proof you're still alive. Use it." This wasn't just about her anymore. Other families were scattered across the ship, cornered like she had been. If she ran now, she would be running alone. The Velkir swept forward, hunting, but they hadn't counted on the Aspen Dawn's people. From side corridors, doors burst open. Colonists surged out, engineers with cutting torches, farmers with spears made from irrigation pipes, mothers clutching shot prods meant for livestock. They weren't soldiers, but desperation had sharpened them. "Protect the children," someone roared. The bay erupted into chaos. Velkir lances lashed out, sizzling arcs slamming into bulkheads and flesh alike. Colonists screamed but pressed forward, driven by a raw, furious will to survive. One woman swung her wrench into a raider's helmet, cracking it open. A farmer drove a sharpened stake through another's chest, collapsing with him. And at the front, Nox was the storm. He hurled himself into the tide of aliens, claws gouging through armor, jaws breaking bone. He didn't move like an animal anymore. He moved like war-given flesh. Raiders fired at him, striking again and again, but he refused to die. Even scorched and bleeding, he fought on, every wound only driving him to greater frenzy. The Velkir shouted in panic, their formation breaking. "It's unstoppable," one screamed. Another dropped his weapon and ran, only to be cut down by colonists who had learned the truth. The predators bled just like they did. Ella darted through the chaos, her small body slipping where soldiers couldn't. She yanked cables loose from a console, sparking it to life, and rerouted air ducts. Steam hissed across the bay, blinding the raiders while the colonists closed in. She wasn't a fighter, but she could think, and she could make the enemy pay for every step. Through the haze, she caught sight of a mother, hair wild, face smeared with soot, swinging a broken conduit against a raider's knees. Her father was there too, rallying others, shouting orders that turned scattered colonists into something resembling an army. Relief flooded Ella, but there was no time for reunion. The Velkir line collapsed. They had come as hunters, armored and armed, expecting to carve through frightened settlers. Instead, they were being driven back by farmers, children, and one furious creature from Earth's wild past. Still, the enemy had numbers. More boarding parties would come. More lances, more fire. The colonists couldn't hold forever. "We can't win like this," Ella's father shouted over the din. "We need to hit their ship." The words struck like lightning. Of course, the raiders weren't endless. Their power came from the predator vessel latched onto the Aspen Dawn. If they could seize it, or at least cripple it, the Velkir would scatter. Nox seemed to sense it too. He clawed at the corridor leading deeper into the raider boarding tube, growling as though urging them forward. Ella's mother looked down at her daughter, eyes wide with both terror and pride. "You started this fight, Ella. You and that beast." "I didn't mean to," Ella whispered. "No one ever means to," her mother replied. "But now we finish it." With Nox at the lead, the colonists surged into the boarding tube. The corridor shook with the clash of steel and plasma. Every step forward was paid in blood, but they kept going, driven by something no Velkir could understand: the desperate, unbreakable need to protect one another. The predators had thought they were cornering prey. Instead, they had backed prey into a wall, and prey with no escape becomes predator. By the time the colonists forced their way into the Velkir ship's lower decks, the truth was already clear. The hunters weren't hunting anymore. They were being hunted, the lesson of prey. The Velkir warship was a predator by design. Its corridors were narrow, its bulkhead doors reinforced, its walls painted in the dull grays of conquest. But now those same halls rang with alien screams. The colonists pushed deeper, blooded yet unyielding. Behind them, the Aspen Dawn still clung to life, but survival meant more than defense now. It meant seizing the heart of the beast. Nox limped at the front, fur scorched and matted, yet every step was a growl of defiance. He led them through smoke and steel, his presence a banner more powerful than any flag. Ella stayed close, clutching a scavenged shock prod, her eyes burning with determination. She was no longer just a frightened child in the cargo bay. She had seen the worst the galaxy could throw at her, and she was still standing. At last they reached the central chamber, the command deck. The Velkir commander awaited them. Taller than the rest, his armor was blackened with ritual etchings, his lance a double-pronged staff of crackling energy. Around him stood his surviving elites, their visors glowing with cold fury. "So," the commander hissed, his voice booming across the chamber. "This is the prey that days defy us. Farmers, children, a beast from some forgotten world." His gaze fixed on Nox, lips curling back in disdain. "You cost me warriors. You humiliated my house. And now, you will die screaming." Ella stepped forward before anyone else could speak. Her voice trembled but carried through the deck. "You think we pray because we don't look like you. Because we raise families instead of fleets. Because we don't cover ourselves in armor." Her small hand stroked Nox's fur. "But you made one mistake. You thought we'd break." The commander laughed, a sound like grinding metal. He raised his lance. "Then let me prove how easily you shatter." He lunged. The clash was immediate and brutal. His elites surged into the colonists, plasma clashing against steel and fire. Screams filled the chamber. Ella's parents fought beside others, pushing the Velkir back with the desperation of those with nothing left to lose. And at the center, Nox hurled himself at the commander. The honey badger slammed into armored legs, teeth snapping against metal. The lance slashed across his side, searing fur and flesh, but he only roared louder. He clawed, bit, tore, dragging the alien giant down step by step. The commander struck again and again, but Nox refused to stop. Each wound seemed only to drive him further into frenzy. Ella screamed, her chest aching with every blow, but she knew this was Nox's fight. Then she saw the console at the commander's back, the ship's comm relay, glowing with Velkir script. A desperate idea surged in her mind. She darted across the floor, ducking under swings and plasma bursts, until she reached it. Fingers flying, she slammed controls. The commander's image, locked in combat with a blood-soaked honey badger, flooded every Velkir channel across the ship. Every raider saw their leader faltering, not against fleets or soldiers, but against a child's companion animal. "Look!" Ella shouted into the comm pickup. "This is what you fey. Not armies, not fleets, just one child and one beast you thought was weak. If this is what we do, cornered, imagine what all of humanity can do." The words echoed across the Velkir network like a chorus. Panic rippled through the ranks. Colonists, emboldened, pressed harder. The commander roared in fury and struck one final blow, slamming Nox across the deck. The honey badger fell, chest heaving, blood soaking the floor. Ella screamed and ran to him, throwing her arms around his battered body. The commander raised his lance for the killing strike. But Nox stirred. With the last of his strength, he lunged, jaws locking around the commander's throat. The alien choked, eyes wide in disbelief. He staggered, clawed at the beast latched onto him. But Nox held fast, unrelenting. With a final, wet snap, the commander collapsed, lifeless. Silence swept the command deck. Then, one by one, Velkir weapons clattered to the floor. Their commander was dead. Their honor shattered. Raiders fled to escape pods, abandoning the ship to the colonists who now stood blooded but unbroken. Ella cradled Nox, tears streaming down her face. His breathing was ragged, shallow, but his eyes still gleamed with that fierce fire. She whispered into his fur, "You won. We won." The colonists raised their voices in a ragged cheer. The Aspen Dawn had survived. More than that, they had taken a predator's ship as their own. In the days to come, word would spread across the raider clans. The Velkir had fallen to prey. Not fleets, not soldiers, pray, and the galaxy would whisper a new truth. Humans carried Earth with them, in their blood, their will, and even in the fury of their smallest beasts. Ella stood at the viewport, Nox at her side, scarred but alive. She gazed at the stars beyond and whispered, "Next time, they'll think twice before hunting us."